Hey fantasy football fans, Amadeo here with Fantasy Alpha, the free fantasy football app for all your best insights to help you win your league. It's free in the App Store and on Google Play. Now today's video is part 2 of a 4-part series called New Team Who Dis, where I break down every player on a new team and give you my analysis on if that player is in a better situation or a worse situation and how to go about analyzing this player on draft day. Now today's focus is all about running backs, so let's get right to it. We'll kick off today with Le'Veon Bell going from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the New York Jets. Now, what has changed about Le'Veon Bell's situation? Well, he leaves behind one of the best offensive lines in football in Pittsburgh to go to a mid to low-level tier offensive line in the New York Jets. Also, he leaves behind veteran quarterback Ben Roethlisberger to play with his second-year quarterback in Sam Darnold. And he took a full year off of football, so there might be some rust for Le'Veon Bell to shake off, especially in the beginning of the season. So we think Le'Veon Bell is going into a worse situation in New York. Next up on our list is Mark Ingram, who goes from the New Orleans Saints to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, what's changed about Mark Ingram's situation? Well, he scored 18 touchdowns in his last 22 games, so he's got a high touchdown per game ratio. Now he goes to Baltimore, where they ran the ball the most times in the league in 2018, and they were second in rush yards per game with 152, only second to the Seattle Seahawks. So he's going to get a lot of opportunities to score some touchdowns. Also, last year for Baltimore, Kenneth Dixon and Gus Edwards both averaged over 5 yards per carry. So if they can average over 5 yards per carry in Baltimore, Mark Ingram definitely can. So we like his situation going from New Orleans to Baltimore as the main back. Next up is Tevin Coleman, going from the Atlanta Falcons to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, what's changed about Tevin Coleman's situation? Well, last year in 14 games, he had 9 total touchdowns, and he has scored 28 touchdowns in his last 44 games, so he can find the end zone, and that's off limited carries. He's been playing opposite Devontae Freeman his entire career. Now he's reunited with Kyle Shanahan again, of whom he played with in Atlanta before he moved on to San Francisco. And his main competition in Jerick McKinnon is nursing an injury still, and that might linger into the season. Now, Matt Breida's there in San Fran, and he might steal some carries from Tevin Coleman, but they gave Tevin Coleman the contract, and he's got the veteran credentials to lead this backfield. So we like Tevin Coleman's situation going to be the lead back in San Francisco. Next, we have Jordan Howard going from the Chicago Bears to the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, what's changed about Jordan Howard's situation? Well, the last few years, he's been in Chicago, where it's really just been him and Tariq Cohen getting the ball. Now he joins Philly, where they drafted Miles Sanders in the second round. They still have Darren Sproles. They still have Corey Clement, Josh Adams, and Wendell Smallwood all on the roster. So it's a very crowded backfield. But Jordan Howard has scored 18 touchdowns his last 2 seasons. So he's a very good goal line back, and he'll most likely keep his goal line role here in Philly. Also, he's in a contract year, and when a player's in a contract year, they're very incentivized to play their best football so they can land a contract elsewhere. So we like Jordan Howard's situation. It's not necessarily better than Chicago. It's about equal. Next up, we have Carlos Hyde, going from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, what has changed about Carlos Hyde's situation? Well, last year, Kansas City running backs scored 24 total touchdowns. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Carlos Hyde to find the end zone. Also, his main competition is Damian Williams. In Damian Williams' 5-year career, his highest carry total in a season is 50. Carlos Hyde has carries of 240 in a season and 217 in a season. So we really like Carlos Hyde's veteran presence here in a high-scoring offense. Next up, we have Latavius Murray, going from the Minnesota Vikings to the New Orleans Saints. Now, what has changed about Latavius Murray's situation? Well, last year, the New Orleans Saints had the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL with 26. And Latavius Murray himself has 26 touchdowns in his last 44 games. So he's got a high touchdown per game ratio. Latavius can get a lot of opportunities to score touchdowns in New Orleans. Also, with Mark Ingram gone, he's going to be filling that Mark Ingram role. He might not get as many carries as Ingram got, but he'll probably get between 8 and 12 carries a game as a backup, which is a lot. So we like Latavius Murray in New Orleans' backfield this year. Next up, we have C.J. Anderson, going from the Los Angeles Rams to the Detroit Lions. Now, what has changed about C.J. Anderson's situation? Well, in the final 2 games last year, C.J. Anderson had 299 rush yards and 2 touchdowns for the Rams, and then he added another 2 touchdowns in the playoffs, so he proved he can play. But in Detroit, Kerryon Johnson is definitely going to be the preferred back out of the backfield early on, and especially in the passing game. But Detroit hired offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell to lead the charge. Now in Seattle, Bevell had Seattle ranked top 5 in rushing 4 times. So Detroit is definitely going to be focused on running the ball a lot this year. So Anderson will see his opportunities, but for the most part, he's going to be behind Kerryon Johnson. But we think he's in an equal situation here as a pretty solid backup. And the final running back on our list is Duke Johnson, going from the Cleveland Browns to the Houston Texans. Now, what has changed about Duke Johnson's situation? Well, he goes to Houston, where he instantly becomes the second best running back in that backfield behind Lamar Miller. Now, he leaves a slightly more explosive offense behind in Cleveland, but he was going to have to contend with Nick Chubb and eventually Kareem Hunt. And also, at the end of the day, he's going to have the same role he's always had. He's going to be a pass-catching specialist. He'll probably have more opportunities in Houston, but he's still going to have to learn a new system. So we think Duke Johnson in an equal situation. Well, that's it for running backs. Stay tuned for part 3 in this series, wide receivers, that'll be dropping soon right here on the Fantasy Alpha YouTube channel. And be sure to subscribe below. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter for all your latest fantasy updates, and download the Fantasy Alpha app. It's free in the App Store and on Google Play. Until next time, I'm Amadeo with Fantasy Alpha.